champagne tower collapses. Glass shards slice through a man's neck. Blood sprays across white marble in rhythmic bursts. This isn't a movie plot, this is a wedding death that happened in front of everyone, and today we're looking at the worst wedding deaths no one seems to talk about. Qaraqosh, Iraq, 2023. Let's start with the deadliest of them all. On September 26, 2023, hundreds of guests were inside the Al-Haytham Wedding Hall in Qaraqosh. It is a Christian town in northern Iraq. The room was packed for a series of weddings. The bride and groom were on the dance floor. Guests were filming on their phones. The music was still playing when the wedding hall was set alight. Guests were standing in one corner. Smoke filled the hall. Guests turned towards the exit, but the crowd moved at the same time. That's when you can see that chairs were overturned. Families were separated. Some people were trampled in the crush, while others were trapped inside as flames moved through the hall. More than 100 people died, and many others were injured. The bride and groom survived, but the room around them did not. The people who escaped came out burnt, coughing, and covered in ash. Outside, relatives tried to pull guests from the doors while emergency crews worked through smoke and heat. The wedding video became the evidence of how fast a celebration can turn into a locked room disaster. If you want stories that show how small decisions can destroy an entire crowd, subscribe to the channel now. The next case begins with a dance floor, then the floor itself disappears. Versailles Wedding Hall, Jerusalem, 2001. It was May 24, 2001. Karen and Asaf Dror were celebrating their wedding at the Versailles Wedding Hall in Jerusalem. Nearly 700 guests were inside the building, but that was the worst mistake. On the third floor, people were dancing in a circle. The music was playing and the camera was recording what should have been a normal wedding video. The key failure was right underneath them. The floor system had been weakened by poor construction decisions and later modifications. There was a sagging section that had been treated like a cosmetic problem instead of a structural warning. Extra material was added to level it, which made the weakened area even heavier. During the reception, the crowd was dancing with joy, but suddenly the floor gave way. Guests did not stumble. They dropped. A large section of the third floor collapsed, sending people through the lower floor in a single violent fall. Tables, chairs, concrete, and bodies all fell down into the hole. For a few seconds, the wedding video shows dancing, and then it becomes a dust scream and empty space where the floor had been. Around 23 people were killed, and more than 300 were injured. The bride survived with serious injuries, and the groom's grandfather was among the dead. The failure was not in the sudden death. It wasn't sudden in the engineering sense. The warning signs were already there. The sagging floor, added weight, and weakened support piers were all part of the chain. The collapse happened when the building finally ran out of strength. Jahra, Kuwait.
The intensity of the fire was clear from how little it left behind. When it began, the tent which had occupied this scorched space was packed with women and children celebrating.
It was August 15, 2009, and there were women and children gathered inside a wedding tent in Jahra, Kuwait. The men's and women's celebrations were separate, as it is common in many Gulf weddings. Inside the women's tent, guests were sitting, rocking, and celebrating the marriage, but outside, the groom's former wife had other plans in her head. She poured petrol full onto the tent and set it on fire. The tent was packed and reportedly had only one main exit. Once the fabric caught on fire, the rush through the structure started within minutes. People moved towards the exit at the same time, but the crowd jammed near the opening. Smoke and heat filled the tent before many guests could even get out. The most deadly part was the speed and the layout. The tent fire does not behave like a slow-building fire from fabric, decoration, carpet, clothing, or furniture. Everything can ignite almost immediately. Within about 3 minutes, the celebration space had become a trap. 57 people died, many of them women and children, and around 90 others were injured. The woman who started the fire was later convicted and executed. This case remains one of Kuwait's deadliest civilian disasters, and it began with not an experiment or an equipment failure, but with revenge. Kushinagar, India, 2022. On February 16, 2022, a wedding ritual was taking place in Kushinagar, Uttar Pradesh. Women and girls had gathered near the old well during this ceremony. The well was covered by a slab, and several people sat or stood on it while the celebration continued. The mistake was not visible at first. The slab looked like a surface. However, it was actually a weak cover over a deep opening. As more people gathered on top, the slab suddenly collapsed, and then the women and children standing there dropped into the well together. The fall happened in a tight cluster, giving people little time to react, and those nearby rushed forward, but the opening was quite narrow. The victims were below the surface, and the scene became confusing immediately. 13 people died, including women and young girls. 2 others were seriously injured, and some of the victims were taken to the hospital but were declared dead on arrival. This was not a firebombing or building collapse. It was a hidden hazard sitting inside a wedding space. The guests were not doing anything extreme. They were just standing where the ceremony had brought them. The danger was under their feet, hidden by something that looked safe enough to... We are nowhere near done with the worst wedding deaths. So subscribe now, because the next case happened not due to an inner accident but during the time of the war. war. Al-Wahija, Yemen, 2015. Back in September 2015, a wedding reception was being held in Al-Wahija near the Red Sea port of Al-Mocha in Yemen. The country was already deep in a war. Still, families gathered in the tents for a celebration because even during conflict, people continue to marry, eat, sing, and try to hold on to ordinary life. Then the missile hit the wedding area. Residents described it as an emergency, but the consequences were immediate. From fabrics, tables, bodies, and debris, women and children were among the dead. Survivors carried the injured to hospitals that were already overwhelmed by war. Medical officials later said that the death toll reached 131. The Saudi-led coalition denied responsibility, while local officials and medical sources blamed an airstrike. The dispute over responsibility didn't seem to change what happened on the ground. A wedding site became one of the deadliest civilian incidents of the Yemen war. For families, the argument over responsibility came after the funeral, after hospital corridors, and even after names had been counted. What makes this difference is the scale here. It was not a single exit blocked or an unsafe floor failing. It was a family celebration that was hit by something that no one had ever expected. Kabul, Afghanistan, 2019. On August 17, 2019, more than 1,000 people gathered at Dubai City Wedding Hall in western Kabul. The wedding was in the mostly Shiite Hazara area, a community already been targeted many times by the extremists, and inside the hall, guests were dancing, clapping, and celebrating near the stage. The attackers entered the crowded area wearing an explosive vest. The turning point came when they moved near the area where guests were gathered, mostly women, and then he detonated the explosive. The blast destroyed the hall, cutting through the dance floor and stage area. The first people closest to the explosion were killed instantly, with their bits and pieces thrown around everywhere. Others were struck by shrapnel, glass, and debris. Survivors described the horrors of smoke, darkness, and bodies across the floor. The bride and groom survived, but the wedding hall itself was destroyed in seconds. Families searched hospitals through the night, with parents looking for children, so relatives moved between morgues trying to identify bodies. At least 63 people were killed and more than 180 were injured. The Islamic State claimed responsibility. Here, the attack was not aimed at one couple. It was aimed at a community using our wedding hall because it guaranteed a dense crowd that maximizes civilian loss. Gaziantep, Turkey, 2016. On August 20th, 2016, a Kurdish wedding celebration was taking place in Gaziantep, Turkey. The party was held in a residential street neighborhood where families were gathered outside. Children were present. Music and dancing filled the area late into the night. Then, a suicide bomber appeared and entered the celebration. The exact age of the bomber was reported in the first reports, but Turkish officials said that the attacker may have been a child or a teenager. What matters physically is where the bomber detonated. It was close enough to the crowd that it hit families packed together in an open street. The explosion turned the wedding into a mass casualty scene. People nearest the bomb were killed instantly, while others were hit by the fragments and pressure waves. The streets were filled with injured gas before ambulances arrived. Shoes, chairs, clothing, and wedding decorations were left scattered where people had been dancing. More than 50 people were killed and dozens were wounded. Many of the dead were children, which is why the attack shocked Turkey even in a year already marked by violence. Officials blamed the Islamic State. The bombing showed how a public wedding procession, which is normally one of the visible parts of a family's life, could be turned into a target because the crowd was open, predictable, and unprotected. Aswan, Egypt, 2025. Last is a horrifying case of Ashraf Abu Hakam, who was on the dance floor with his bride, surrounded by the guests, filming the happiest moment of his life. Even while he was dancing, you can see that he wasn't in the best shape possible, but still, the guy was trying. The couple was overperforming traditional Saidi dance, which is a style associated with Upper Egypt. Ashraf was holding his bride's hand while waving a Saidi stick, which is a wooden prop often used in dance. The crowd was cheering, and the music was still playing, and nothing in the room suggested that the next few seconds would change everything that the guests and the bride had ever experienced. Then suddenly Ashraf fell down on the floor. The footage shows him falling on the floor in front of his bride and the surrounding guests. People immediately rushed towards him. The celebration stopped as relatives and friends tried to help, but attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. Doctors later confirmed that he had suffered sudden cardiac arrest and died within moments. What makes this so painful is how ordinary the moment looked before the whole mess happened. There was no fire, explosion, or visible warning, and no time for anyone to react. 1 second, the groom was dancing at his own wedding, and then the next he was dead, lying on the floor. A wedding is supposed to gather the people closest to the family in one place, all at once, under one roof or one tent. This is exactly what makes these disasters so severe. One mistake, one failure, one strike, and everything is gone. Which moment surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see us cover more dark sides of the world.